Behind the burnout, the policy story of teacher well-being. Across different countries, teachers are leaving the profession. Burnout is rising, sick leave is increasing, but what if teacher well-being is not a personal crisis, but a policy story? A group of educational researchers set out to investigate a growing concern, teacher well-being. Using analytical tools such as problem trees, PESTEL analysis, stakeholder mapping, and historical and comparative review, they examined how this issue unfolds across 4 different realities: Finland, Ireland, Brazil, and the United Arab Emirates. What they discovered reveals a story far more complex than burnout alone. Because burnout is not the root, it is the symptom, and when they traced the roots, the structure became visible.
People say I'm burned out. They ask if I've tried better time management, if I've set boundaries, if I've practiced self-care. But this isn't about yoga, it isn't about resilience. Every year, expectations grow.
When we look at this problem tree, we don't just see theory, we see structure. And that structure explains why so many teachers are exhausted. Structural causes sit at the roots. This isn't about individual resilience. It's about how policy, expectations, and accountability systems interact. There's tension between academic performance and well-being priorities. There's ambiguity around roles. Policies are layered on top of each other, but rarely removed. The system keeps expanding and so does the pressure. Then there's economic strain. Financial constraints mean staff shortages. When positions aren't filled, the workload doesn't disappear, it's redistributed. Larger classes, less specialist support, fewer substitutes. Over time, that leads to staff overrun and burnout. We see it in increased and higher staff turnover. Next is documentation overload. Every initiative requires evidence. Every inspection demands proof. Curriculum delivery is increasingly compliance-driven. Instead of focusing fully on teaching and relationships, time is spent reporting, tracking, and demonstrating impact. The paperwork grows, but the hours in the day don't. Then we face inclusion pressure. Inclusion is the right goal, but it requires resources. Teachers are supporting diverse learning needs, behavioral challenges, and social-emotional complexities, often without adequate specialist backup. That creates a daily tension between wanting to meet every student's needs and simply managing capacity. And finally, there is the expanding mental health discourse. Schools are now expected to respond to anxiety, trauma, and well-being concerns. Again, this is important work, but it adds another layer to teacher responsibility. We are asked to safeguard student well-being, while our own well-being becomes increasingly strained. When you look at the full tree, you see the pattern: economic pressure, administrative overload, inclusion demands, and well-being expectations all intersect. The consequences are visible: increased sick leave, staff turnover, reduced consistency, and long-term impacts on school communities. But how does this look in different contexts? We begin in Finland, a country internationally recognized for educational excellence.
Through stakeholder analysis, what became visible is a structural tension between high policy expectations and local implementation capacity. Finland operates within a decentralized governance model where national steering, municipality responsibility, and trust-based professionalism intersect at the unit level. At the national level, the Ministry of Education and Culture, together with the Finnish Education Evaluation Center and its quality evaluation mechanism, defines strong expectations for pedagogical leadership, accountability, and quality assurance. Inclusion and equity are central policy principles, and leadership is framed as pedagogical-driven, research-informed, and professionally autonomous. However, municipalities determine staffing structures and time allocation. This means that although expectations are nationally articulated, the actual conditions for leadership work vary locally. In practice, leaders are expected to ensure quality, coordinate staff, manage administration, often without structural adjustments in time or resources.
This is where the documentation load and municipal funding constraints become critical. Evaluation systems and accountability mechanisms identify administrative demands. Leaders carry legal, pedagogical, and managerial responsibility, and in many cases, continue teaching. This creates role ambiguity and workload overload. Importantly, the stakeholder map shows that unit leaders and teaching staff have high interest but limited influence over government's structures. Decision-making power sits primarily at national and municipal levels. So the overload does not stem from individual shortcomings. It emerges from the interaction between decentralized governance, accountability systems, and resourcing variation. Teacher and leader well-being in Finland is therefore shaped not only by professional competence, but also by how leadership time and responsibilities are structurally enabled within the system.
We now turn to Ireland, where well-being is not peripheral, but formally embedded within the education system itself.
In Ireland, teacher well-being is not absent from policy. It is firmly embedded within the curriculum itself, both in the Junior Cert and Leaving Cert curriculum. The Wellbeing Framework places student wellbeing at the centre of educational provisions. Schools are required to allocate dedicated time for wellbeing and is positioned as a core component of holistic education. On the surface, this signals strong policy commitment. However, Ireland also operates within a system of heavy accountability. Schools must engage in regular inspection processes and are required to conduct continuous school self-evaluations, known as SSE cycles. These cycles demand structured reflection, target setting, action planning, and documented evidence of improvement. Wellbeing, therefore, becomes both a value and a measurable objective. This creates a dual expectation. Teachers must promote wellbeing in the classrooms, while simultaneously evidencing impact through formal processes. Implementation capacity becomes critical. While the policy framework is clear, schools vary in staffing levels, leadership support, and time allocation to carry out improvement planning effectively. The success of wellbeing initiatives often depends not only on policy intention, but on available time, expertise, and institutional resources. In Ireland, the challenge is not policy silence, it is the balance between embedding wellbeing as a principle and managing the administrative structures required to sustain accountability.
In Brazil, the story begins earlier, with salary inequality, legal disputes, and the fight to secure basic working conditions. We turn now to Brazil.
In Brazil, teacher well-being has been addressed through two very different reforms. In 2008, the salary floor that we call here Lei do Piso established a national minimum wage for public school teachers and guaranteed that 1/3 of the working hours should be reserved for planning. This was a structural attempt to reduce financial stress and protect time to major drivers of burnout. But implementation has been uneven. Municipalities often cite budget constraints, and planning time is not always fully respected, unfortunately. More recently, in 2024, we had an update to NR01 introducing psychosocial risk management into labor regulation. For the first time, stress, burnout, and work overload are officially recognized as occupational risks. This shifts the responsibility from the individual resilience to the organizational accountability. Yet, recognition alone does not automatically change daily working conditions. Together, this reform shows that Brazil has acknowledged both the economic and psychological dimensions of teacher well-being. But structural alignment and consistent enforcement remain ongoing challenges.
United Arab Emirates presents yet another dimension, reform intensity within a centralized system.
In Sharjah, teacher wellbeing operates within a centralised governance structure led by Sharjah Private Education Authority, SPIA. This sets regulatory standards and conducts structural inspection cycles across private schools, evaluating clearly defined and monitored academic outcomes, inclusion practices, safeguarding, leadership effectiveness, and school improvement planning, providing consistency and clarity across the system. However, accountability requires evidence. Teachers must document student progress, interventions, differentiation strategies, and alignment with improvement targets. Private education sector is a competitive market environment. Inspection ratings influence school reputation and parental trust, which directly affect enrolment stability. Teachers are expected not only to comply with standards, but to adapt continuously to reform priorities. In Sharjah, teacher wellbeing is shaped not by policy absence, but by the cumulative intensity of regulation, market accountability, and reform ambition operating simultaneously.
To better understand these differences, the researchers compared the four contexts through a PESTEL framework.
We compared Finland, Ireland, the UAE, and Brazil through a PESTEL lens in order to understand how different systems shape teachers' work. Politically, the UAE and Brazil are more centralized. Decision-making power sits at the top, which can limit school-level autonomy. Policies often focus on maintaining social stability and protecting dominant interests. In contrast, Finland and Ireland are more decentralized. Leadership is shared between the national and local levels, giving schools and teachers greater professional agency. This creates a space for trust-based practice.
Economically, Brazil faces significant financial constraints, while the UAE has strong resources but operates within competitive education markets. Finland and Ireland work with tighter public budgets. Across all 4 countries, globalization pushes systems towards efficiency, accountability, and measurable outcomes. Teachers increasingly work under pressure, shaped by economic competitiveness. Socially, teaching prestige varies, but rising parental expectations are common everywhere. As societies become more globally connected, teachers face increased scrutiny and emotional labor.
Technologically, digitalization affects all systems. While technology enables innovation, it also increases workload and documentation. Standardization expands, allowing systems to monitor performance more closely. Environmentally, infrastructure and sustainability priorities differ. Finland places a strong emphasis on sustainable education, while the resource quality varies widely in Brazil and the UAE.
Legally, Finland provides stronger protections for teachers' working time and conditions. In the UAE, Brazil, and Ireland, safeguards around workload are generally weaker. Despite these differences, common pressures remain: heavy workload, rising parental expectations, staff shortages, and a persistent gap between policy and practice. Overall, PESTEL shows how global forces and local structures together shape teachers' everyday reality.
Across Finland, Ireland, Brazil, and the United Arab Emirates, the contexts differ, but the pressures often look familiar. Teacher well-being is not simply a personal challenge. It is shaped by policy choices, economic conditions, and institutional expectations. Understanding these systems is the first step toward designing policies that truly support the people at the heart of education.